Right, we are moving on to the next chapter, that is the scope. And scope is naturally the most important chapter because after integration, um, scope is going to establish the foundation on which whole of the project is going to be standing. In scope, we have got naturally the plan scope management, where the scope management plan will be established, and not only the scope management plan, but also the requirement management plan. If you remember, I said there are two management plans in scope. One is a scope management plan, and another is a requirement management plan. What is the importance of requirement management plan? Because I want to establish the scope, and before we can establish the product scope, I have to have the requirements confirmed. But when I open the Pandora box of requirements, that is a never-ending kind of a process. I will interact with the stakeholders, and stakeholders will give me the requirements, and then there will be a lot of negotiations and change requests going on uh, based on the requirements. Therefore, requirement management plan will have to be separately created, and then once the requirements are finalized, then we move on to the scope and establish the product scope, and then the plan, project scope, and so on and so forth. So plan scope management will give us the two management plans, requirement management plan and the scope management plan. Remember that the scope management plan will remain the superior plan amongst the two. Requirement management plan is a temporary purpose, that is just to collect the requirements. Whereas a scope management plan has a larger purpose, it will encompass the requirements as well as all the activities of scope. Once that is established, in the next step would be to collect the requirements. And naturally, as I just said, when trying to collect the requirements, we have to take into account both the scope management plan and the requirement management plan. Naturally, the role of requirement management plan would be more effective in the collect requirements, but still scope management plan will also be entertained there. Once the requirements have stabilized, then the next important step is define scope. And this is very important because here we will establish the scope statement. And scope statement includes the reasoning for why we are doing the project. Basically, this is going to provide the justification for the existence of project from the project manager, by the project manager. Previously, the justification provided was by the project sponsor in charter. Project sponsor felt that this project can be done and it is aligned with the objectives of the organization, and therefore it should be done, and he issued the charter. But now, after thorough analysis, project manager will respond back, and if he thinks it cannot be done, he will give his reasoning in the scope statement, or if he thinks it can be done, then again he will give his reasoning. And once project manager has provided the scope statement with a justification, then it becomes project manager's baby to get the job done, because he is convinced that it can be done and he has taken up the job, therefore it must be doable. Once the scope statement is ready, then the last step in planning would be to create the work breakdown structure. We break down the scope even further down to the work package level, and that work package level has only to be broken down further into activities, but that is not to be done here. That will be done later in when we are trying to establish the activities in time management, schedule management. Remaining two processes, the validate scope and control scope, relate to the monitor and control process. There is no process here for initiation, no process for execution, and no process for closing. The first four processes are in planning, and the last two processes are from the monitoring and control. And even in the last two processes, validate scope relate with the deliverable, the final user acceptance testing of the deliverable, and once that test is passed, then the deliverable is in accepted form. It is just to be handed over. We will hand it over to close, and close is responsible for handing it over to the customer. As far as the control scope is concerned, that is about the fulfilling the project scope. What was the scope of the project? What was to be done, and how much has been done? The same story, variance analysis, trend analysis, forecasting, projections, all that, and based on that, some change request can come up. So change request can come up either from the validated scope or control scope. So these are the 6 processes of scope. Scope management includes the processes required to ensure that the project includes all the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. Now, this is very important statement. When it says all the work required, meaning all what was in the scope of the project must be done. You cannot leave out an important work which was required to fulfill the scope of the project. So everything which was required, which is important for meeting the project scope, must all be done. And then it also says, and only the work required. You are only supposed to do that much what is required to meet the project scope. Anything extra will be redundant and would not be contributing towards the scope of the project. Therefore, we will be spending extra money and resources on that. We don't want to do that. To complete the project successfully, I should only do that much what is required, and we should do all that what is required. Managing the project scope is primarily concerned with defining and controlling what is and is not included in the project, meaning that we want to establish what is in scope and what is out of scope of the project. We should only be doing the in scope items, and out of scope items should not be handled. Again, these are the 6 processes. We will discuss each one in detail. These are the 6 processes, and this is one chart which shows the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs of all the 6 processes. Although we will discuss them one by one, and therefore I am not explaining this here. Before we can move ahead, let us establish what is the product scope and what is the project scope. Product scope, all the functions and features which are supposed to be part of the product, service, or deliverable, whatever you are producing, the product you are trying to produce, what all are the functions, features, specifications, characteristics of that product is within the scope of the product. So here we are only talking about what to create, not how to create. So what to create and what all is to be included in that creation. How would it look like, or what should be its dimensions, what should be its specifications, what should it do. So the functions, features, characteristics, specifications, all that about the product, service, or result is the product scope. So this is what. Now the next question is why. Sorry, how. What we know, product scope is to be met, that is what. And how do you meet it? That is the project scope. All the work required to be performed to deliver the product according to those functions and features which were characterized to be in the product. That work represents the project scope. And we have already said all the work and only the work. All the work required to create the product according to its functions and features is within the scope of the project. Anything extra which is not contributing towards the product is out of scope of the project. So we must understand that anything extra we are doing is going to be redundant and going to waste the company resources. So we should not take it lightly, and only the project scope is to be completed. Project life cycles we already understand. Project life cycles can range along the continuing from predictive approaches to one end to adaptive, and on the other side it can be agile. Predictive life cycle, the project deliverables are defined at the beginning because we know exactly how a project is going to turn out and there is very less ambiguity. Therefore, we can plan the whole project in one go. So the total product scope and project scope can be assessed in the very beginning. So it is depends upon the clarity of the scope. As far as the adaptive cycle is concerned, we may have a general idea what we want to create, but we don't know how to make it, or how the product scope is going to change. Product scope is likely to change a lot. Customer is going to change his mind many times over, and therefore that would be very difficult to be handled through a predictive life cycle. I cannot design everything beforehand. So the interesting part of the adaptive of agile life cycle is that we plan only a small portion of project, and we go ahead with it as if we can deliver something while the customer is thinking of bringing further changes. So I will reduce the size of my project life cycle or the phase to such a small size that the customer doesn't have to wait for me to finish uh, the phase and then to bring the changes. I am restricting my work to maybe 1 or 2 weeks long only. So I can hardly pick up to 5 to 10 jobs. So 5 to 10 activities I am handling while the customer is thinking to bring changes in the rest of the project. Naturally, the 10 jobs I have picked to do in the first cycle or first iteration may not be changed, should not be changed, but at least I have left out everything else which could be changed. So the specifications can be changed completely ahead of this 10 tasks, and that I will account it. When I move on to the next portion of the work for next 1 or 2 weeks, I will pick up another 5 to 10 tasks, and I'll keep moving ahead. So customer is happy because he can bring changes anytime. I am happy because I have a small workload. I'm continually delivering something, and my boss is also happy because team is self motivated, and I am also happy because of the less load on myself. I am just facilitating. I'm not, you know, uh, sitting on top of the team. Team is working on its own because they have picked the job according to their own wishes. The team establishes what to do and how much to do. Project manager doesn't tell anything to the team in iterative or agile life cycle. The project manager, or for that matter, here there is another role that is called the product owner. Product owner is usually the stakeholder. Stakeholder has a much tougher role. He is the one who interacts with the stakeholders and collect requirements from them, and those requirements he keeps putting into a basket, and that is called a product backlog. And with the help of his project team, he prioritizes those product backlog, those requirements. We call them user stories. The requirements are called here user stories. So just like storytelling. So we do not engage the stakeholder. We expect the stakeholder, the customer is not you know, is not very technical, and he cannot explain his requirement. So we ask him to tell us in scenarios, in epics, in stories, what can happen to him. He says when somebody comes to the customer service. Say Mr. X has come to the customer service and he wants something to be done, then our people should be able to do it in this much time. So this is a story he has told me, and out of the story, I will extract the requirement. So we will collect the user stories. We will not collect the requirements, but these user stories will point to the requirements and further to the functionalities I need to develop. So these user stories will be refined. Some of the user stories will be too abstract and they have to be broken down into smaller user stories. The initial item which I pick from the customer in Agile is called an epic. It's a long story. So this long story is normally broken down to small stories which are called user stories, and all the user stories are put into the product backlog, which initially unsorted with just your you know piling all the requirements, all the user stories into this basket. And after you have had this basket uh, filled, you will ask your agile team to come and help sort this basket out. So what they will do is they will refine the requirements. I mean the user stories. So if there is a bigger requirement, a bigger epic, They will break it down to stories and clarify the functionality in each user story as if it is crisp and clear. And then they will do the prioritization of the requirements of all the user stories. Whichever has to be done earliest and brings the highest value, maximum value, must be at the top. So if we have high value targets in the beginning, then we will achieve bigger successes in the beginning. And that will make us happy, that will make the customer happy, that will make the project manager and project sponsor happy. So everybody will be happy with that. And moreover, we are also being flexible. So customer is happy because he can bring any changes anytime. So this is about the adaptive life cycle. Projects with adaptive life cycles are intended to respond to high levels of change and require ongoing stakeholder engagement. The overall scope of an adaptive project will be decomposed into a set of requirements and work to be performed, sometimes referred to as a product backlog. I have just explained to you what the product backlog is. At the beginning of an iteration, the team will work to determine how many of the highest priority items on the backlog list can be delivered within the next iteration. So the iteration you are going to undertake, the team, it is a choice of the team to go and pick as many tasks as they think they can do in the small period of time of whatever fixed time you have given him, 1 or 2 weeks, whatever. So say it is 2 weeks. So how many? It's a team of 10 people of varied skills, broad skill, and you are asking them to pick as many tasks as they think they can handle. So maybe they pick out of the product backlog 10 tasks and they take it to their workspace. Their workspace is called a sprint. And just like a product backlog, they have a sprint backlog. They will put all the 10 items in that prioritization order in the sprint backlog. Then they will pick out the top one and start doing it together. Once they have done it, they go on to the second, third, fourth, fifth, and ultimately they would have done all. If the time of 2 weeks is not over, they can go back to the product backlog and pick out few more tasks and bring it into their sprint backlog and keep doing it. So the interesting part is they do not complete their initial assignment and then go to sleep. They will actually be continuously working and they will be picking out the new task if they have already done what was were picked in initially. Similarly, if they um they have picked more tasks, maybe they have picked 10 tasks and they could not do 10 tasks, they could do only 8 tasks, then nobody is asking them how and why, because performance 8 task performance will be counted and 2 completed in the given time will be placed back into the product backlog. Next team will come, they will start that way. The whole responsibility of what to do and how to do is with the project team. Project manager has absolutely nothing to say about it, except for the fact that he would be conducting stand-up meeting on a daily basis, and he will just ask 3 questions from each of the team members. What did you do yesterday, and what will you do today? And third question is, what are the impediments? These 3 questions he will note. That will be his progress. And moreover, what the impediments are the job of the project manager to remove. So he will just do the facilitation and ensure that the impediments in the way of the team are immediately removed as soon as possible, as if they can perform better. That is exactly what is the spirit of Agile. Beginning of an iteration, 3 scope processes are repeated for each iteration. We are talking about Agile now. In Agile, every iteration of say 2 weeks, we will collect requirements, we will define scope, we will create a WBS for that. But if we are doing it for the waterfall or iterative method, non-iterative method, predictive life cycle, we will do all this once for the whole project, or for that matter, if it is for if we have phases, once for each phase. But here in iterative life cycle, we have got so many iterations. We don't have phases. We have small iterations, and we may have 100 iterations. So every iteration will have collect requirements, define scope, and create WBS. On the contrary, predictive project, as I said, these processes are performed towards the beginning of the project or phase and updated only when necessary, using the integrated change control system. In an adaptive or agile lifecycle, the sponsor and customer representatives could be continuously engaged with the project to provide feedback on deliverables as they are created and to ensure that product backlog reflects their current needs. Though we do not appreciate the customer uh, interfering with the work, but we give them the liberty to check our backlog and see our backlog, what we have picked, and if they agree with what we are doing. Number two, whenever we complete something, we try to deliver our output. Customer is involved, and customer will inspect, and without their permission, the item will not be declared complete. And we must provide continuous feedback in Agile. Two scope processes are repeated for each iteration. In each iteration, at the end of it, we'll validate the scope, we'll control the scope. On the contrary, in predictive lifecycle, what happens is the validate scope occurs with each deliverable or phase. So at the end, when the phase or deliverable is about to complete, at that point we are doing validation and control, and this thing goes on. Predictive projects, the scope baseline for the project is the approved version of the project scope statement, WBS, and the associated Wbs Dictionary. So our baseline in case of predictive projects include of three things. Scope baseline is the scope statement, the WBS, and the Wbs Dictionary. Wbs Dictionary is the a list of all the work packages with brief description of each work package. Baseline can be changed only through formal change control. Once the baseline has been created, it can only be changed through change request process and is used as a basis for comparison while performing the validate scope and control scope processes. Projects with adaptive lifecycle use backlogs, including project requirements and user stories, to reflect their current needs. Completion of the project scope is measured against the project management plan. Project scope is done through control scope. Project scope, whether it is complete or not, is checked through the control scope process. And what we do there, we compare the project management plan with the work performance data and see how much scope of the project has been completed, while completion of the project scope is measured against the product requirements. If we are checking the product scope, which we do in the validate scope process, we see what all features had to be there in the product and are they there or not. This is checked against the product requirement. So this thing is called validate scope. The term requirements is defined as a condition or capability that is required to be present in the product, service, or result to satisfy an agreement of other formally imposed specifications. Validate scope is the process of formalizing the acceptance of the completed project deliverable. The verified deliverable, which is coming from the quality control, are an input to the validate scope process. One of the outputs of validate scope is accepted deliverable that are formally signed off and approved by the authorized stakeholders. Therefore, the stakeholder needs to get involved early on during planning, sometimes initiating as well, and to provide inputs about quality of deliverable so that control quality can assess the performance and recommend necessary changes. You see, validate scope, we have generally said that deliverable from execution first goes to the quality control and then the validate scope. But this point says that if the customer requires These two processes, control quality and validate scope, could be brought closer and joined together. Maybe customer wants to be involved in quality control also, so we can do that. But generally speaking, first the items are quality controlled, and then scope is validated. Requirements. They have been always been a concern in the project management and have continued to gain more attention in the profession because requirements is at the basis. If the requirements change or the stakeholder change their mind, then the whole project will take a new form, and customer will be at unrest. It is not customer is not going to be satisfied. As the global environment becomes more complex, organizations are starting to recognize how to use business analysis to their competitive advantage by defining, managing, and controlling requirement activities. Business analysis is all about requirements. Requirement management is basically an area of specialization of the business analyst. Business analyst actually does the detailed requirement analysis, but whatever the business analysis has done, whatever the feasibility and business case has been given to the project manager still has the right to confirm those requirements, and that is exactly why he is interacting with the stakeholders. While he is confirming those requirements, naturally, most of the requirements will be confirmed, but some of the requirements will be proven wrong. They should be excluded from the project, and he can recommend that. Moreover, there might be a lot many requirements coming from the stakeholders, their wishes, their needs, and expectations, which may be a good candidate to be included in the project. And naturally, if there is a justified case, project manager may recommend that requirement to be included in the project. There will be many requirements from the customer which will be unjust. So project manager will try to convince the stakeholder that this is not in the scope of this project, and therefore that should not be included in the project. But if the stakeholder insists, then and project manager cannot convince him, in that case, this has become an issue. And issues, if not resolvable by project manager, must be escalated to the next higher level, and that is the project sponsor. So he must pitch the case in front of the project sponsor, and then project sponsor is dealing with the stakeholder, and ultimately, whatever decision the sponsor makes, project manager has to follow that. If somehow the project sponsor seems convinced with the stakeholder, then naturally there is no problem with the project manager. Project manager will definitely be getting extra funds or whatever is required for doing that job, and that would be included into the scope of the project. So project manager has no problem at all if it is formally included into the project. Um, and if you see stakeholder gets convinced that yes, sponsor convinces him that this is not to be done here, maybe we can start another project after this project, and we can fulfill those requirements of yours. So that case, project manager is again at ease. As the global environment becomes more complex, organizations are starting to recognize how to use business analysis to their competitive advantage by defining, managing, and controlling requirement activities. This I've already read. So the activities of business analysis may start before a project. Naturally, we understand that much before the project is initiated and project manager is assigned. Project manager does not exist normally when the business analysis is carried out. According to the requirement management practice guide, the requirement management process starts with a needs assessment, which may begin in portfolio planning, in program planning, or within the discrete project. So whatever and howsoever you want to do the requirement management, that is defined in the standard of requirements management. So requirement management is a good standard for to be read by the project manager as well as by the business analyst. But it is more akin to the business analyst job. Then we have got the trends and emerging practices. Eliciting, documenting, and managing stakeholder requirements takes place within the project scope management process. Eliciting is a specific word used by business analysis, and it is more, executive word than gathering, data gathering, yeah, requirement gathering. Eliciting means that it is just not the matter of asking the stakeholder what do you want, but it is a matter of digging out of the stakeholder what he means. He may not be able to explain it. So once you question him, once you ask the stakeholder, you give him the certain cues, you facilitate him as if you can read his mind, or you can extract information by scraping from it out of his mind. This is called elicitation. So elicitation and then documentation and then managing the stakeholder requirement. This all is done from project manager's perspective during project scope management processes. Trends and emerging practices for project scope management include, but are not limited to, focus on collaborating with business analysis professionals. Why? So these are the reasons. First of all, determine the problem and identify the business need. So project manager, if present at the time of the business analysis, he will be able to understand the problem better, identify and recommend viable solutions for meeting those needs, elicit documents and manage stakeholder requirements in order to meet business and project objectives, and facilitate the successful implementation of the product, service, or end result of the program or project. The process ends with the requirements closure. As soon as the requirements are finalized, you can move on to your scope thing, which transitions the product, service, or result to the recipient in order to measure, monitor, realize, and sustain the benefit over time. The role with responsibility to conduct the business analysis should be assigned to resources with sufficient business analysis skills and expertise. If you are asking project manager to behave like a business analyst, he must be provided sufficient skills of business analysis. If a business analyst is assigned to a project, requirement-related activities are the responsibility of that role. Project manager is responsible for ensuring that requirement-related work is accounted for in the project management plan and that requirements-related activities are performed on time and within budget and they deliver value too. The relationship between a project manager and a business analyst should be a collaborative partnership. Nobody is bigger or smaller, though these two people are to work together where business analyst can focus on the requirement, project manager can focus on the work. The project will have a higher likelihood of being successful if project managers and business analysts fully understand each other's roles and responsibilities to successfully achieve project objectives. Because each project is unique, the project manager will need to tailor the way the project scope management processes are applied. Considerations for tailoring could be knowledge and requirement management, validation and control, development approach, stability of requirements, and governance. All of these things must be taken care of. Then are the considerations for Agile. Many environments with emerging requirements find that there is often a gap between the real business requirement and the business requirement that were originally stated. Therefore, Agile methods purposefully build a review prototypes and release versions in order to refine the requirement. So rather than making the whole product, first make a small product or give some mock-up and try to get approval on that. And if that be the case, then you can move ahead with the next stage. As a result, scope is defined and redefined throughout the project. In agile approaches, the requirements constitute the backlog. Moving on to the first process, and that is plan scope management. And remember, every first process for every knowledge area, the very first process in planning is just to establish the guideline for the remaining process, for the subsequent process. So plan scope management is just going to tell you how to define activities, how to do the requirement collection, requirement gathering, how to, define the scope and how to create the Wbs. This is what is to be explained. Naturally, it will give you your tools and whatever that will be defined there. So it is the process of creating some scope management plan that documents how the project and product scope will be defined, how it will be defined, validated, and controlled. The instructions for that, the guideline for that. So the key benefits of this process is that it provides guidance and direction on how the scope will be managed throughout the project. This process is performed once are at predefined points in the project. In the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs are given here. Okay. This is wrong. This is project charter. So you have project charter, you have business document, you have agreements and enterprise non-factor and process assets. You use expert judgment, data gathering, same tools, brainstorming, focus group interviews, conflict management, facilitation, etc. And the result is the scope management plan and the requirements management plan. So nothing new here. Plan scope management is a component of the project and program management plan. So whether you are doing the project management or program management, both ways, you have to have a scope management plan that describes how the scope will be defined, developed, monitored, and controlled and validated. The development of the scope management plan and the detailing of the project scope begin with the analysis of information contained in the project charter. The latest approved subsidiary plans of the project management plan. You remember, scope management plan was a part of project management plan. The inputs are charter, project management factor and process assets, which we understand. Then we have the tools, expert judgment, data analysis, and meetings. That is also we understand, and the output. We have got the scope management plan and the requirement management plan. So first, let's have a look at scope management plan. As we said already, requirement management plan is a component of the project management plan that describes how project and product requirements will be analyzed, documented, and managed. Components of requirement management plan can include but are not limited to how requirement activities will be planned, tracked, and reported, process that establishes how the scope baseline will be approved and maintained, and process that specifies how formal acceptance of the completed project will be maintained. Scope management, this wrongly written. First was the requirement management plan, then is the scope management plan. So the headings are wrong. This is not the requirement management, this is a scope management plan. The scope management plan is a component of project management plan that describes how the scope will be defined, developed, monitored, and controlled and validated. And the components of scope management plan could be how requirement activities will be planned, tracked, and reported, configuration management activities, requirement prioritization process, metrics, and traceability structure. Next is the scope management collect requirements. Collect requirements according to the requirement management plan as well as the scope management plan is the process of determining, documenting, and managing stakeholder needs and requirements to meet objectives. The key benefit of this process is that it provides a basis for defining the product scope and project scope. You understand what the product scope is, you understand what the project scope is. So this provides a basis for that. So this process is performed once at predefined points in the project, and the inputs, tools, and techniques for collect requirements are project charter is required, project management plan is required, project documents are required, and business case, which is the business document, is required. Agreements, if any contracts are there, they are required. Enterprise boundary factor and process assets will be required. Tools, we have expert judgment. Always we have that. Data gathering, we can use a number of tools. Brainstorming, interviews, focus groups, questionnaires, surveys, benchmarking, etc. And I'll explain these. Data analysis, you have to do the document analysis. Decision making, we have already discussed what is voting and what is multi-criteria decision analysis. So that will be used here. Data representation, we can do it by mind mapping or you drawing an affinity diagram or something like that. Interpersonal skills, nominal group techniques, observations, conversations, and facilitations, and context diagrams and prototypes can be used. End result is the requirement documentation is created and the requirement traceability matrix. Now, traceability matrix is a very interesting document. This ensures the linkage with the requirement, who gave this requirement, uh, how it is, how important this requirement is, what is the priority of this requirement, and what are the tasks linked to accomplish this requirement. So this is a kind of a thread we establish to trace the requirement right from the origin stakeholder down to the output. And in case at some stage in life this requirement is vanishes, this is no more required, then I must eliminate the whole path, because I will be doing activities which are out of scope, which should not be included in the project. So as soon as the requirement remains no more, I have to review and eradicate unnecessary items. Okay, let me move on to the tools. Oh, expert judgment. In expert judgment, just a minute. Right. In expert judgment, expertise should be considered from individuals or groups with specialized knowledge or training in the following topics. So, as far as correct requirements is concerned, I have to get in touch with the business analysts, requirement elicitation I should understand, requirement analysis, requirement documentation. These are the specialty areas which I need to understand or I need to seek advice on. Project requirements in previous similar projects, diagramming techniques, facilitation, conflict management. So I need expert advice on all of these matters. Then for gathering, brainstorming, as we have already discussed, this is for creativity exercise. So we brainstorm if we want to come up with new solution, out of the box solutions. Brainstorming is a group exercise. It could be, creativity can be done in isolation and also, but brainstorming is something in which we discuss. So we coin a new idea or coin um, a mind diversion and let the team discuss and find new ways out of it. And if there is something consequential, we note it down and then we keep discussing like that. Interviews. If I know who are the people who are holding the data and they are few, then I can go to them and have a detailed qualitative interview with them and note down their requirements. But normally this might not be true. The data must be requirement data might be held by a wider audience. Normally in if there are not few people who just have to be interviewed. I had been in certain cases where I have gone to the heads of the departments as if they will be able to provide me all the requirements. But I learned that many of the heads of the departments are not capable of knowing what is happening in their organization. They do not know their requirements. So they rely on their specialists. So then I ask them to create a focus group and ask all the relevant people in a meeting, and in front of them, I discuss with the whole group. That is called focus group. Focus group is good because all the specialization comes in front of you and you will be able to understand the whole picture. But the problem is, in front of their boss, they may not reveal everything. Interview is more intimate. It is one to one. So I can be frank with the other person. I can ask him number of things. But in presence of so many people, everybody does not get easy on it. So focus groups do have their advantages and do have their disadvantages. Questionnaires and surveys are only filled in the case of very large audience whom you probably cannot reach out. So you prepare a questionnaire and you spread it out to all the people, get it filled, and analyze their quantitative input. So you see, interview and focus group was qualitative in nature because you were depending on the quality of data which is being received. Here you are depending on quantity of data, right? You can't ask lengthy questions. You just ask yes no questions are the questions which could be answered on a scale of say 1 to 5 or something. So questionnaires
Yes.
will be analyzed. Ji?
That's fine.
So the questionnaires can be analyzed, and you can do the statistical analysis on them, and you can get a fairly good result out of it. Benchmarking is comparing yourself against your competitors. Benchmarking, people generally think that benchmarking is something to do with the standard, or benchmarking is reaching out to a pre-established standard. No. Basically, you benchmark yourself against your competitors, see where they stand, see where you stand, and where you want to be, and then you decide to beat your competition. These are the data gathering techniques. There's a lot of discussion there, and there could be more. So you can read through it, you can read through other books also, if you really want to learn more about it. Then is the decision making. We have already discussed the voting, we have already discussed the autocratic decision making and multi-criteria decision analysis. This is exactly the same. Voting, as we discussed earlier, that could be unanimous, majority voting, and plurality voting. This could be done. Data representation, affinity diagrams are like flow diagrams which show the affinity of items with each other. What depends upon what? So the processes on which many processes depend, they become more important, right? So affinity diagrams allow large number of ideas to be classified into groups for review and analysis. Mind mapping is yet another exercise in which you consolidate your ideas created through individual brainstorming sessions into a single map. So you bring in your ideas, you put it on a map, on a sheet of paper, and then you diagrammatically link all the ideas together, and then try to reflect commonalities and differences in understanding to generate new ideas. So this is a way of this is also, mind mapping is also contributive towards the creativity. Interpersonal and team skills. Nominal group technique is, you divide the group into smaller groups, say 4 to 5 people, and give them the discussion topics separately, and each team lead brings his solution to the table, and all the team leads then join their solution, and ultimately you can find a common solution. Observations and conversations, you can uh, get a lot of data by simply talking to each other, talking to your customers, and observing their facilities. When you enter the facility of your can promptly generate an idea what type of organization is this, and when you talk with them, that also gives you are collecting the information. Then you should have the skill of facilitation, how to prompt the other person to give you more information. Nominal group technique, okay, we'll just skip that.
Here, this decision making by voting, have you seen that practically happening?
Yes, of course.
In organizations,
voting is very common. Naturally, not in an autocratic organization. Autocratic organization don't do that, but the organization where you give value to your team, then you ask what these are the options. Vote for the best option. So whichever gets the maximum votes is the winner. So this does happen. We did it in PMI. We were actually able to create the new strategic vision of PMI. It was back in 2005, and we were people from 25 countries. We were the selected leaders, and we were asked to strategize, and they used these new modern techniques, and they were hardly in, I think, 25 to 30 minutes, we were able to give them new strategy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, Delphi technique and all that is very interesting. The things go like very quick. Facilitation skills are used in the following situations: when you are jointly developing something with the customer, when you are working under a quality function deployment, which is called house of quality, when you are doing agile and dealing with user stories. So there also your facilitation skills are required too much. Context diagram is something like this, and in this you can see uh, all the databases are at the center, and all the people or the stakeholders interacting with it, they are on the sides. So internal stakeholders on one side and external stakeholders on the other side, and the data in the middle. So shows the HR talent management system of ABC company. So job seekers will also interact with this database, and hiring managers will also. So internal and external sources, stakeholders will be interacting with that. So context diagram could be created like that. Prototypes, naturally, I talked about it, that when I am trying to deliver something to my customer, and I am doubtful what he perceives, so his perceptions are translated into a prototype. Maybe I can make a diagram or a 3D model and present it to him and ask him if it is what he wants, and he can then correct me. So if the problem cannot be resolved in 2D, then we go for 3D, and ultimately, like in a construction of a house, the drawing is normally not understood by common man. But if you show him a 3D model, then they are very convinced there is a door, there is an entry, and this is how it will look like from a far distance and all that. Then the requirement documents are the output of it, and traceability metrics. Naturally, requirement document will include all the requirements. They will describe how individual requirements meet the business need for the project. Requirements may start out at a high level and become progressively more detailed. As we move on in the project, the requirements are further elaborated. Progressively, they are elaborated, so they become detailed. Uh, as far as these are different kinds of requirements, there could be business requirements, there could be stakeholder requirements, there could be solution requirements, and the solution requirements will include the functional and non-functional requirements. Then we may have the transition and readiness requirements, project requirements, and quality requirements. Now, you see where you need to fix on is the solution requirements, functional requirements, and non-functional requirements. So, functional requirements are the specifications, functions, and features to be included in the product. And non-functional requirements are the quality requirements. Basically, quality of the solution. This is what we need to focus on. Project requirement is different. Project requirement is what project management tools have to be used, or what project management procedure has to be used. Quality requirement is also different. This is not the non-functional quality of the solution. This is the quality of the organization or of the vendor. So quality requirement, maybe the organization which is creating this product is a ISO 9000 certified organization. So all the work in that organization would be according to that standard. So that is inheritance, which will come to our solution also. But about the quality of the solution, that is included in the non-functional requirements. Then business requirements are business analysis related. Stakeholder requirements, as we have already talked about, we will interact with the stakeholders to gather their needs and expectations. And solution requirement is about the product. And my focus for the project would be on the solution requirements. And transition requirements are those when I will deliver my project, how will it be implemented into the operations of the organization, or how the customer will utilize my solution. So there will be certain transition requirement that this machine which I have created will be transported, and then installed, and then the training will be provided and all that. This all is the function of transition until and unless that goes into operation. So that concludes the collect requirements, and probably we should not move ahead. Now, let me explain the traceability matrix a bit. Okay. Tracing requirements include, but not limited to, the business need. No, your requirement must have a link with the why, what was the initial business need, what were the opportunities, goals, and objectives for which this requirement is linked to. What are the project objectives with which this requirement is linked? What is the project scope and Wbs deliverable which this requirement represent? What is the product design according to this requirement? What is the product development associated with this requirement? Test What is the test strategy for this requirement? Test scenario for this requirement. Why? Because uh, how well this requirement is being fulfilled can only be measured through the test strategy and all that. High level requirement to more detailed requirements. So this requirement, if it has to be broken down further, what are the subclasses of this requirement? So this, if recorded somewhere, then it will be much convenient for me for any later stage. If this requirement has to be removed, what will it impact? Upwards and downwards, how this requirement is flowing. If this requirement is no more, then will my business scope will be effective, my goal and objectives will be affected or not. Attributes associated with each requirement can be recorded in the requirement traceability matrix. These attributes help to define key information about the requirements. So this is another example of what can be included. Every requirement typical attributes used in the requirement traceability matrix is: you must have a number given to each requirement. You must have a textual description of the requirement, which should be clear. Rationale for why this requirement was included. Who was the owner of this requirement? What is the source of this requirement? What is the priority? What is the version of this requirement? Version is the configuration. This is version 1 requirement, version 2. Current status of this requirement. Is this requirement still active? Or it has been cancelled? It has been deferred? It has been newly added, approved? What is the status? And what is the date of the latest status date? Additional attributes to ensure that the requirements has met stakeholder satisfaction could be, you can add these features also: the stability of the requirement, the complexity of the requirement, the acceptance criteria of the requirement. And this is a kind of a example for requirement traceability matrix, where you can have a number associated with each requirement, a description provided, link to the business needs, opportunity, goal and objective, project objective, Wbs deliverable. So you see the complete link to down to the testing. How this requirement is to be tested, this is also written there. So if we have all the requirements jotted down here, we can ensure each requirement by tracking it on this chart. So this is called requirement traceability matrix. So here we come to an end of the collect requirements. You can have the break for 1 hour, and we can then start from this point onwards.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. You take care. Moving on to the next step, that is 5.3, define scope. This is a step where, just a moment. Okay, define scope. This is where we develop the scope statement. So define scope is the process developing a description of the project and the product. You see, in requirements, as I explained earlier, in requirements, we have established the need and expectation of the stakeholders. We have captured all their requirements, and we have sorted out the good from bad. Appropriate requirements have been chosen and recommended, and ultimately, I am now able to recognize the scope of the product more clearly than before. The charter which was given to me, the business documents which were given to me, in a way I have further refined the requirement, and now I am going to be clear about the product scope. Here I am going to establish the product scope. And once I have the product scope, then I can define what to do to achieve that. The key benefit of this process is that it describes the product, service, or result, boundaries, and acceptance criteria. This is important. Acceptance criteria is also established. What will be, it is part of the product scope that this is what we require and what will be the test case for accepting it. The inputs, tools, and techniques for defining the scope are, um, I think this slide is not correct. Let me refer to the original matter. Scope. Let's hold on a minute.
Sure.
Right. So this slide is not correct. This is from the previous version. Inputs, we have the charter, we have the project management plan, we have the project documents and enterprise loan procurement process assets. So all the top three items are here. It should be the project management plan and project documents. In tools, expert judgment is okay. Rest, everything is wrong. Probably only the diagram part is wrong. Otherwise, the slides are okay. Remaining slides are okay. Data analysis is the tool, and within data analysis, we need to do the alternatives analysis, which I have already explained to you. In decision making, this is also a tool here, and decision making, we need to do the multi-criteria decision analysis, which already have been explained to you. Interpersonal and team skills, facilitation is required, which already has been explained. The new thing here is the product analysis. Product analysis is only required for defined scope because you need to understand the product before you can come up with the solution how to make it. First, understand and conceive what you are asked to develop. What are you trying to develop? First of all, you have to analyze the product. Maybe you have to compare it with other practices. Anybody else who has created a similar product, what was the characteristics of that, and what is the characteristic of this one, and how am I going to make it? Making it is the second question. The first question is you analyze the product. As far as outputs are concerned, these are all wrong. The basic outputs are two. One is the project scope statement. By doing the product analysis, I will be able to establish the project scope statement, which includes a number of things, which includes the product scope, which includes the project scope, which includes the alternatives, and so on and so forth. I will explain that later. And also, in light of this, we might update certain project documents, like the assumption logs can be updated, requirement documents can be updated, requirement traceability matrix can be updated, and stakeholder register can be updated. So all of these things are in the defined scope. So this diagram was wrong, but here it is okay. This diagram is okay. Charter is coming, project management plan, which includes the scope management plan, that is coming. Product documents, we have got assumption log, requirement document, and register. This is input, or enterprise non-manufacturing process assets are input. And as I said, scope statement is the output. And project documents which are going to be updated are assumption log, requirement document, requirement traceability matrix, and stakeholder register. So these are all these items which are to be done here. Now what do we do? Since all the requirements identified in collect requirements may not be included in the project. This is what PMBOK is saying. So the desires of the people might be more, but actually they cannot be done. They cannot be included in the scope of the project. The defined scope process selects the final project requirements from the requirement documentation developed during the collect requirement process. So we will establish what can be done. Naturally, after doing proper analysis of the thing, and if there is a requirement which should be fulfilled and which is beneficial for the project objectives, we must include it outrightly. Naturally, after getting it approved from the sponsors. But if there is a undue requirement by the stakeholder, I've already told you the procedure. You will try to convince the stakeholder, otherwise you will escalate the case and let the decision be made by the project sponsor. It then develops a detailed description of the project and product service or result. So first of all, I have the product scope ready based on the requirements, sorted requirements. Once the product scope is understood, then the next part is I will answer the question how to make it and what all the work is involved. This would be called the project scope. So basically, our scope statement will be giving out the product scope as well as the project scope. The preparation of a detailed project scope statement builds upon the major deliverables like assumptions and constraints that are documented during the project initiation. And naturally, those assumptions have been continuously being updated also. During project planning, the project scope is defined and described with greater specificity. As more information about the project is known, existing risks, assumptions, and constraints are analyzed for completeness and added or updated as necessary. That means my assumption list now is much more richer than before. Defined scope process can be highly iterative, progressive learning, progressive elaboration is going on. So as I think more, I keep adding more things into it. Naturally, duly with the permission of the project sponsor. In iterative life cycle projects, a high level vision will be developed. Now it is talking about the agile. In agile projects, we don't have the detailed requirements available. So a high level requirement outline of the overall objective is known, and then we only focus on the one iteration. We deliberate only on the details of the one iteration product scope and project scope. Uh, I think product analysis I would like to explain. Rest everything you already know. Product analysis can be used to define products and services. Whatever we are producing, product analysis will analyze it. It includes asking questions about a product or service and forming answers to describe the use characteristic and other relevant aspects of what is going to be delivered. Each application area has one or more generally accepted methods for translating high-level product or service descriptions into meaningful deliverables. Requirements are captured at a high level and decomposed to the level of detail needed to design the final product. So I definitely need the product scope to be clear as if I can start making it. If you ask me to just construct a house for you, how can I construct a house for you until unless I know how many rooms and bedrooms you want and what kind of design you want? Just by saying a house is not sufficient. You have to give me some input. So I will ask you, I'll question you, and I'll establish the scope, the product scope. Examples of product analysis techniques include, but are not limited to, product breakdown. This is a very good way. Prince 2 people in UK, they used to have product breakdown. They didn't, create the work breakdown structure. They used to create the product breakdown structure. That we have to construct a house. The house will be divided into three parts, and the part one will be the construction of the lower floor and this and that. So they break it down to that level where it can be, the lowest level product can be achievable. Exactly the same formula we use for the work breakdown structure, but the only theory here is in work breakdown structure, which we'll just study. In work breakdown structure, we want the lowest level to be the work itself, not a piece of a product. Requirement analysis is another tool which we have already done. Systems analysis, how the whole system is going to work if you are designing a system. Systems engineering, value analysis, and value engineering. These are various tools which appropriately you might be using in whatever profession you are in. Ultimately, I am going to come up with a scope statement. It will become interesting when we talk about the ingredients of the scope statement. Okay, that detailed project scope statement, either directly or by reference to other documents, include the following. Naturally, we can, take some input from the charter or other document which had been created earlier, but this scope statement is going to be much more detailed than the charter or any other document, because this is the scope, this is the justification and scope provided by the project manager as he intends doing it. Therefore, nothing can be more detailed than this. Product scope description should be there. Deliverables should be clearly defined. Acceptance criteria for the deliverable should be defined, and what is not to be done, what is excluded, what is there are certain needs and requirements of the stakeholders which cannot be encompassed into this project. So such things are project exclusions. So we will explicitly mention that this is not part of our job. We will not do it. Scope description will be progressively elaborated. The characteristic of the product, service, or result described in the project charter is further elaborated through the requirement document, further elaborated through our question answer when we selected the final product scope. Deliverable, what is going to be output, naturally that is within the product scope, a unique and verifiable product. How are you going to check it? The testing of that product is also, checking and testing of that product is also to be clearly mentioned at the time of identifying the product. So verifiable product results are capability to perform a service that is required to be produced to complete a process, phase, or project. Deliverables also include ancillary results such as project management reports and documentation. These deliverables may be described at a summary level or in a greater detail. Acceptance criteria, set of conditions that is required to be met before deliverable are accepted. So what all has to be checked, what all has to be tested before the deliverable can be declared complete. So those tests and those acceptance criteria must be fulfilled. This is the user acceptance testing, which will be done, which will be achieved actually in the validate scope process. And project exclusions, as I said, identifies what is excluded from the project, explicitly stating what is out of scope for the project, helps manage stakeholder expectations, and can reduce scope creep. So if I have excluded something and stakeholders agreed that this is exclusion, then later it cannot be added or included um, through scope creep. Scope creep, what is scope creep? Scope creep is addition of scope, addition of requirements uh, into the project without any approvals, without any permissions, without any change request. So such like changes which somehow get into the project without any approval, but they affect the scope, time and cost. These are called the scope creep, and scope creep is very dangerous for the project. And naturally, it must be introduced due to some problem, some process not followed, some pressures or whatever, which normally we accept certain kind of pressures, and sometimes we accommodate customer requirements without proper change request. It is uh, strongly prohibited. It should not be done, because scope creep is going to damage your project, and naturally the extra funding required for that, how are you going to fulfill that? Okay, coming back to scope statement, which is the output. Although the project charter and the project scope statement are sometimes perceived as containing a certain degree of redundancy, naturally, I agree with that, because the charter, the headings, the topics covered in charter and the headings covered in scope statement are very similar. So it looks like that charter and scope statement are one and the same, but they're not. The headings may be same, some of the headings may be similar, but the level of detail in charter is less and in scope statement is much more detailed. They are different in the level of detail contained in each. The project charter contains high level information, the broad basic information which is not that detailed, while the project scope contains a detailed description of the scope component. Remember, charter was developed by the project sponsor who did not have much information except for the business case and all that. Project manager has gone into the requirement gathering and all that, and he has done a lot of research and he knows all the details. So he is the right person to elaborate in detail all the requirements of the product. These components are progressively elaborated throughout the project. Let us see. I don't really agree with this chart because this chart shows probably charter is a much longer document. Actually, what he has done is he has given naturally the headings are okay. I have no problem with the headings included for the project charter, but naturally this is not the format. But these can be considered okay. But for scope statement, he did not open up these topics. So project deliverable, there might be a lot many bullet points in it, acceptance criteria and all that. So these things have to be further detailed. Essentially, project scope statement is a much larger document than the charter because charter is just a 1 to 2 page document which just briefly describes all of these items which are listed here. But project scope statement goes into depth of the deliverable. Maybe the whole drawing and design of the deliverable would be included in the scope statement. Updates will be in the assumption log, requirement documents, requirement traceability matrix. They all can be updated, and along with that, the stakeholder register may also be updated. Next is a WBS. WBS is supposedly the last scope process in planning. Although we have got two other processes, validate scope and control scope, but they are part of monitoring and control. As far as planning is concerned, create WBS is the last step, and here we will further open the scope statement into uh, work breakdown structure. Before talking about work breakdown structure, let me talk a bit more about scope statement because I feel that the information shared in scope statement is not really sufficient. How would I take it? What is scope statement from my point of view? First of all, as I said, I have the requirement document, I have the requirement traceability matrix, and in light of that, all those requirements which can be and should be included in the project, I would, you know, get them included naturally by intimating my project sponsor. And once that is agreed that all these requirements are part of my project scope, based on that, I will establish the product scope. And while doing that, I need to do the product analysis thoroughly because without doing the product analysis, I cannot establish the product scope. And later on, how to create that product, that is again a question which will be helped by the process of by the tool analysis. Once I have all the requirements in place, then I will and product scope is then I will ask myself, will I create a product? So, what would be my approach? There might be more than ways of doing this job. So, I will recognize all the possible alternatives. And out of those many alternatives, naturally, I will do the cost benefit analysis for each one of them. And whichever is the best approach, I will choose that. And that approach would be the general direction in which I intend going for creating that product. So my project scope will be tailored according to the selected approach. If you like, you can again take your alternatives of various approaches and go back to your sponsor and get his help and let him agree on one of those approaches, and whichever approach you have ultimately agreed, then you start working on that. Now, according to PMP, okay, the job finishes here, but I don't think that job finishes here. Here, you need to do 2, 3 more things as well. Once you have selected the approach, the next thing in scope statement, you must define your approach towards this selected alternative. How would you go about it? Here is a time when you develop the project life cycle according to this approach. Your project life cycle, how are you going to divide your project into phases? What are the phases? How long the phases will take? Each phase, you will have to name each phase, and you will have to tell what will be the deliverable for each phase, who will be responsible for each phase, and what are the salients for each phase. What is the product for each phase, and what are the acceptance criteria for each phase. So this is not only, we are not only talking about the project, but the phases also. So whole project divided into phases, and each phase must clearly specify what output will be there at the end of these phase, and who will be responsible, and what will be the acceptance criteria. All this is included. Once you have gone to that level, probably this is what the scope statement should all include. Because in WBS, we will start working further than that. We will start creating the work breakdown structure from this point onwards. So let us see what is included in WBS. Create work breakdown structure is the process of subdividing project deliverables and project work into smaller, more manageable components. Now we don't bother how you divide your work breakdown structure, how you divide your project. Maybe you do the product breakdown in the beginning and later it is converted. The lowest portion we want it to be work. The last level of your work breakdown structure should be work. We don't want the lowest portion to be small little products. Like, I am breaking down my car into smaller parts and the lowest portion is a nut or a bolt. What does that mean? It should be, if it is a nut, then I should tell what to do with this nut. Right? So that means nothing if it is the product is to at such a small scale. Maybe if it is a wheel, I can say that put on the wheel on the car. This could be an activity. So activity level or work package level should be work, and beyond that, above that, probably we can have product, we can have anything, we can divide the work breakdown structure in any way you feel like you want to break it down phase wise, you want to break it down sub project wise, you want to break it down deliverable wise, you want to break it down task wise, approach wise, howsoever you want to break it down. But just remember that you have to break it down to a work package level. And remember, work package is the lowest portion of WBS, but it is not level which cannot be further subdivided. Each work package contains of certain number of activities which we are not interested to outline right now, and it will be the job of project scheduling to break down the work packages into further activities as if they can be planned. But as far as the project manager is concerned and the interest of the project manager is concerned, WBS should not go beyond the work package level. Like I'm constructing a house and I say this wall, construction of the wall for this room is a work package. Fine. But work package, this wall may have a number of activities into it. So this work package may contain a number of activities, and actually those activities will consume time, and I'll calculate based on that. So it is perfectly all right if I can go down to the work package level and later divide it into activities. The key benefit of this process is that it provides a framework of what has to be delivered. This process is performed once or at predefined points in the project. So the inputs, tools, and techniques are again this chart is not right. I have to correct all these charts. Okay. This is much simpler a chart. Whatever is written here is wrong. Inputs are project management plan. And naturally, from project management plan, what I'm seeking is the scope management plan. The second input is the project documents. And from that, what I'm seeking is the scope statement which we just created and the requirements document which was created before that. Then enterprise environmental factors and organizing process assets. In tools, I just have two items, not so many as I need to have the expert judgment and decomposition. Expert judgment is already defined many times. Decomposition. Decomposition is the skill of breaking down a thing. So I am going to break down the project down to a work package level. So the process of breaking down, it looks simple, but it's not that simple because it's a highly logical work and all the people do not have the intelligence to that level to break an activity, a work down into work packages. Why? Uh, you see, you might have seen in every family there is a person who is in habit of operating on anything in the house. As a child, he would break open his toys and see what is inside. As a adult, he would kind of open the TV and try to fix it. And sometimes he fix it as well. But you see, this kind of incisive mind is required for creating the WBS. Logical breakdown of the things. Because this person is curious, inquisitive, and he wants to go deeper into the things. Probably he has better logic, better intelligence to understand how the things work. So this is a good guy for breaking for decomposition. Another person, if you ask him, okay, how will you do this project, and can you divide it downward, he may be able to, with difficulty, he may be able to break it down to one level or maybe at most two levels, but beyond that his mind is not going to work, and therefore everybody doesn't have the skill of decomposition. Only intelligent people, only inquisitive people can be good at this. I don't say that only intelligent person must be hired to do this job. Bring your whole project team together, and all these jobs, all this work which we are talking about, they are not the responsibility of project manager alone, but they are the responsibility of the whole project team. And you must facilitate, as a project manager, you must facilitate that people be able to decompose. You encourage those people who are going into the right direction and so on and so forth, and ultimately decomposition is done. And as a result, you will have the scope baseline. Now, scope baseline is a big term because basically we have created a work breakdown structure. So to consolidate that, he has simply written scope baseline, but scope baseline does include three things. One, the scope statement we created in the previous step, that is part of the scope baseline. Number two, WBS we just created. And number three, the work packages which were identified as the lowest form of lowest level of the WBS, those work packages have to be listed down in form of a table, and those work packages must be briefly described. So this table containing the names and numbers of all the work packages with a brief description is called Wbs Dictionary. These three items are the ingredients of the scope baseline: scope statement, WBS itself, and WBS Dictionary, which is the list of all the work packages. And then this also, Create WBS will also be updating certain documents like the assumption log and the requirement documentation. So uh, this is all what we have in WBS. This diagram is okay. Probably I forgot to fix those earlier diagram tables. This diagram shows correctly project management plan. Out of project plan, I need the scope management plan. Out of documents, I need the scope statement and the requirement document and enterprise manufacturing and process assets. What I'm creating the scope baseline, which includes It includes the scope statement, it includes the WBS, it includes the WBS Dictionary, and it also updates. And this scope baseline forms part of the project management plan because all the baselines are included in project management plan. The documents which are updated here are the assumption log and requirement documentation. So, WBS is a hierarchical decomposition of the total scope. The total scope has to be broken down to smaller scope and smaller to smaller, and ultimately we want it to be broken down to our work package level. So total scope of work has to be broken down to be carried out by the project team to accomplish the project objective and create the required deliverable. WBS organizes and defines the total scope of the project and represents the work specified in the current approved project scope statement. These are the inputs. Naturally, I would only like to describe the decomposition. Decomposition is a technique used for dividing and subdividing the project scope. We are breaking down the scope. So dividing and subdividing the project scope and the project deliverable into smaller, more manageable parts. The work package is the work defined at the lowest level of WBS. This is the lowest level of WBS for which cost and duration can be estimated and managed. Now it is that level. When I say a wall is my work package, then I can estimate how much it will cost and how much time it will take to construct this wall. So that's why this is that level where I can easily determine the cost and duration of this work package. The level of decomposition is often guided by the degree of control needed to effectively manage the project. In some projects, the things are very sensitive. So my level of control would be too much, but degree of control must be too much. And I may be very incisive in going into the detail, much more detail. But on the other hand, in normal projects, we may not like to go into that kind of detail. The level of detail for project work packages will vary with the size and complexity of the project. Decomposition of the total project work into work packages generally involves the following activities. What do you do when you are decomposing? First of all, identify and analyze the deliverables and related work, and then try to break it into smaller deliverables and smaller portions of work, structuring and organizing the WBS. How your WBS is going to look like, what are the main parts of your WBS, and then what are the further decompositions. Decomposing the upper WBS levels into lower levels of detail, and then developing and assigning identification codes. You must, once you have created this WBS, you must have a numbering scheme, and that numbering scheme would, just like a thesis numbering scheme, it should be like 1, 1.1, 1.1.1, 1. Whatever, and then verifying that the degree of decomposition of the deliverable is appropriate. Do you think that it should not be broken down to further level? Is it the work package level you intended to manage? Have you reached that level? If that is true, then this is done. This is how a work breakdown structure may look like. Can you see this? Yes, now you will be able to see it.
Just one small question. The last point in the
Jay?
yeah, one question. The last point in the previous slide. So these, when you list them and assign them some codes, so that is how the WBS dictionary would look like.
WBS Dictionary, yes, it naturally this number will be there as well, but this number is basically for the accounting purposes. When the budget will be allocated
Right.
and all that, the accounting people will refer to these activities by these numbers.
Okay.
Right. So you can see this chart, and here, for example, the project is Value Management System project. It has been divided into 4 parts. Need assessment 1.1, standard development 1.2, system engineering 1.3, and project management 1.4. It's just a sample, and you will break each one of these branches. It has shown only the breakout of one branch, that is need assessment. Need assessment has been divided into current system audit, 1.1.1, requirement determination 1.1.2, alternative development 1.1.3, and system requirement development 1.1.4. Under 1.1.1, current system audit, it is further subdivided into component identification 1.1.1.1 and component analysis 1.1.1.2, and so on and so forth. You see, with this breakup, the things have become comparatively clearer. Now, for example, we assume that the lowest level 1.1.1.1 and so on, these all are my work packages. So I will create a list of all these work packages, and in list I will write 1.1.1.1 component identification, and then maybe a little brief description of that. And if any other information is to be provided in that table you want, you can do that as well. So this way, my WBS dictionary would be created.
That's right.
Okay. A WBS structure may be created through various approaches. There are many ways, as I already mentioned. You want to break it down from deliverable wise or whatever. Some of the popular methods include top-down approach, use of organization specific guidelines, and the use of WBS templates. There is a bottom-up method also. Top down is you start thinking from top. You think of the project, think of the lower parts, and then sub parts, and so on and so forth. But if you do that, there are some problems. First of all, if you missed out something in the beginning, you have divided your project into four parts, whereas it could have a fifth part also which you ignored and you did not mention. Then you will not be able to conceive that anymore, because your mind is now limited to the four branches, and you will be breaking only those four branches, and the fifth branch maybe you come across very late and you have to make changes at a very late stage, or maybe you don't conceive it at all. But at the same time, this is more methodological. Then the another bad point about the top down is that this involves a lot of discussion, lot of wastage of time. There is a method bottom up, and bottom up, what we do is we gather up all the team and we ask them to think of the work packages of this project. No breakdown, nothing is there. We just think them to conceive what all the work packages will have to be done for the whole project. Everybody is free to contribute, and they can write the work packages on a piece of paper, one work package per piece of paper, and they can give that post-it notes. They can submit those, and once all the points have come from whole the team, maybe somebody has submitted 20 points, somebody has submitted 30 word packages or whatever, we ask them to paste them on the wall. So and mix them all. It's not that your points are on one corner and another person's points are on another corner. Your chits must be totally confused or totally mixed with all the other chits. So whole wall will be number of work packages. We understand that many of the points would be similar. The same point might have been, the same work package might have been defined by more than one people. So next step would be, we'll ask them to find the duplicity. And if you find the same point is written here and there, then say five people have given the same point, the four chits will be removed and only one will be retained out of those five. And if there is a unique point that can stay, then we ask them to remove any unnecessary details. So there might be some work packages which are not really required, so those will also be removed. Once that is done, then we ask them to group these work packages together. So like-minded group work packages would be placed together in a you know um, in a cloud. So there will be many clouds on the wall. There is some points here, some points there. So there will be many groups formed. Now name each group. So once you name each group, then this is your growing upwards. Now once you have named all the groups, there are five groups, and now you can uh, further group and find the further top level, and this way you can ultimately reach the project. There is a little bit of disorganization, but this takes too less time, not much of time. There is no discussion involved in this. And the second good point about this is that when we are thinking bottom up, we are not missing out anything. We have no fear of missing out a complete branch because so many people are coming up with ideas. So almost all the work packages will somehow be identified. The bottom approach can be used to group subcomponents. WBS can be represented in a number of forms, such as using phases. You can break it down as a phase. You can say phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you break out each phase. This can also be done. You can do this project is divided into sub projects. Sub project phases, you remember, I said phases should be sequential in nature. So remember that your phases will not, overlap. But phases, if you have divided your project into sub projects, you can run three sub projects simultaneously. They might start altogether at the same time. Like um, you are constructing 4 towers, and all the 4 towers can be constructed together. But this is too complex. That's why you have divided into four separate sub projects, and they are separate project managers for each. But overall, you are managing it, and you ask them that this is the general life cycle you have to follow. So start work. So they will create their own WBS, or you can create one WBS and say this WBS has got 4 towers: tower 1, tower 2, tower 3, tower 4, and each tower can have its own WBS underneath. So this is another example for software product release 5. Again, it is a good practice to have one branch as a project manager because there's a lot many activities of project management in every project. Therefore, this could be a separate branch, like planning, meetings, and administration of that project could be included in project management. Product requirements, detailed design, construct, where all these things could be there. And naturally, the numbering is not written here, but numbering should be allocated after this. This is yet another example. And decomposition of the upper level WS components requires subdividing the work for each of the deliverable or subcomponents into its most fundamental components, where the WS components represent verifiable product. Each level should indicate something, should produce something. So if I have divided my project into 4 parts, each part must must define a product, a portion of the product. If an agile approach is used, epics can are similarly decomposed to user stories as we are breaking down the WBS. I said when you collect the requirements from the customer, they are at that stage they are epics. Then you sit with your team and break these epics into a number of user stories. User stories are further refined. This is called refined product backlog. The WBS may be structured as an outline, an organization chart, or other method that identifies a hierarchical breakdown. So it could be like organizational chart from top to bottom, and some people do it from right to left or left to right. So this can be done in whatever way you feel comfortable. Verifying the correctness of the decomposition requires determining that the lower level WBS components are those that are necessary and sufficient for completing of the corresponding high level deliverable. Do not put unnecessary levels in that, or for that matter, unnecessary components in that. If something is ornamental in nature, and without that we can still meet the objective of the project, then such like things which are ornamental must be out of scope of the project, out of scope for the project. Different deliverables can have different levels of decomposition. It is very much possible that one branch is opening down to 3 levels and another branch is only opening down to 2 levels. To arrive at a work package, the lowest level of each branch, whatever it is, to second level or third level, lowest level is called the work package. And once I am compiling the list of work packages, I'll just pick up those lowest items and create that list. As the work is decomposed to greater levels of detail, the ability to plan, manage, and control the work is enhanced. However, excessive decomposition can lead to non-productive management effort. We do not want to, go through the paralysis through analysis. That will be inefficient. Inefficient use of resources, decreased efficiency in performing the work, and difficulty aggregating data over different levels of the WBS. So it should be an appropriate level which is good enough for the project. Decomposition may not be possible for a deliverable or subcomponent that will be accomplished far into the future. Well, if I'm working on a predictive approach, and I can think of everything except a specific work, a group of work. For example, I am constructing a hospital, and in this hospital, I know everything about construction, and I know everything, but all is to be broken down. But I don't know about a specific room which has to be constructed because the special nuclear machinery is to be installed there, and so far it has never been installed in Pakistan, and we do not know the specific requirements. Maybe shielding must be required in the walls as if the radioactivity doesn't come out or something like that. So I cannot construct this room until and unless those details are available, but they are not going to be available very soon. Therefore, I will leave out the space for this room and start working on the remaining WBS and the work. I can even construct the remaining part of the hospital, but this will remain as a black box. So I will leave it at the top level as a black box, and this is called a planning package, which has not yet been elaborated. As soon as I am provided the information, I will then further break it down to the work package level. So this such type thing is called a planning package. If you WBS, then PMI has got a practice standard for WBS, and that elaborates these things a little more. So WBS represents all product and project work included in the project management. The total work of the lowest level should roll up to the higher level. So you simply sum up from bottom level upwards, and ultimately top level you will get the whole work of the project. If that is not your project objectives are not being met, your product scope or project scope is not complete, that means your work breakdown structure is insufficient, and you have to correct it and maybe add some things or subtract something out of it. This is sometimes called the 100% rule. So it will always sum up to the product or project scope. For specific information regarding WBS, you must consult WBS standard. And outline outputs are, as we understand, the scope baseline and the project document update. And we understand what is scope baseline, what is included in the scope baseline. We have the scope statement, we have the WBS and the WBS dictionary. It is getting stuck. Okay, I think I'll require about 15 minutes break. I'll come back and then we start. Enough. Hello?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. I just, how long you have not been able to hear me?
No, only 5 seconds, 4-5 seconds. I understood the session.
Okay. I want to have a little break of 15 minutes, and then we can get back and move on.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, then meet you after some time.
Thank you.
Ji sir, are you ready?
Ji, I'm ready.
Right. We are left with two processes of scope, validate scope and control scope. And I've already explained it to you that validate scope checks the deliverable. So this is checking the product scope. It conforms to the product scope, and product scope is checked against the requirements. Whereas control scope will be dealing with the work, meaning what? The project scope. And project scope is checked against the plan. So first we talk about the validate scope, and okay, validate scope is the process of formalizing acceptance. Just a minute. My system is crashing time and again. Okay.
No issues, no issues.
Okay. So validate scope is the process of formalizing acceptance of the completed project deliverable. So it deals with the product. Key benefit of this process is that it brings objectivity to the acceptance process and increases the probability of final product, service, or result acceptance by validating each deliverable. You see, this validation is not going on only for the end product. Whatever is produced from whatever activity, every output, every deliverable, no matter how small it is being validated. And only when it is validated, only then it moves on to the next stage. So it is just like jigsaw pieces, they are being validated separately and they're coming and they're joining. And ultimately, when the whole thing is created, that would be finally validated again. So this process is performed periodically throughout the project as needed. The input tools and techniques are again wrong. Let me refer back to book. You must have this PMB, okay? You can refer it from there. I'll correct these diagrams also, but in this chapter,
Sure.
I have not amended this. Okay, let me read from the validate scope. This is page 163 of PMB, okay? Project management plan is the input, and in the project management plan, the scope management plan, the requirement management plan, and the scope baseline all are required. Why? Because requirement management plan is required for the validated scope because we are talking about the product, and product is to be conformed against the requirements, and we need to have scope baseline. So these three things are included in the project management plan, and they are required here. From the project documents, we need to have lessons learned register, quality reports, requirement documentation, and requirement traceability matrix. It is all about requirements. And the input is the verified deliverable. Why verified? The verified deliverable is coming from quality control. Quality control has verified the deliverable, only then it will reach here. And work performance data. Work performance data, you know that all the controls in monitoring and control will receive work performance data, and they all will generate work performance information. The tool is inspection. For deliverable, whether it is you are going quality control or you are doing validation of the scope, both ways you are inspecting the deliverable. So inspection is your main tool, and then you have to do the decision making. And naturally, if there are more than one inspectors, then voting would matter. Output would be if the deliverable has been accepted, that is accepted deliverable. Work performance data would be converted into work performance information and sent to monitor and control project work. Change request, if any, if there is a defect or something, change request would be sent to integrated change control, and project documents should be updated, which include lessons learned register, requirement documentation, and requirement traceability metrics. So this is the whole picture correctly. You see, from project plan, we are getting scope management, requirement plan, and scope baseline. work performance data from here, verified deliverable from quality control, documents, we are getting all these things. From validate scope is producing the accepted deliverable and is going to close project. It is creating the any change request goes to perform integrated change control. Work performance information created here from the work performance data is going to monitor and control project work, and remaining everything is going to project documents that includes the lessons learned register, requirement document, and requirement traceability matrix. So validate scope is a verified deliverable obtained from the quality control process are reviewed with the customer or sponsor to ensure they are completed satisfactorily and have received formal acceptance of the deliverable by the customer or sponsor. In this process, the outputs obtained as a result of the planning processes in the project scope management knowledge area, such as the requirement documentation or the scope baseline, as well as the work performance data obtained from the execution processes in other knowledge areas, are the basis for performing the validation and for final acceptance. So just remember, validate scope is the very last check. If anything passes through that, then it is already accepted by the customer and it will only need to be handed over to the customer by the close process. Validate scope process differs from the control quality in that the former is primarily concerned with the acceptance of the deliverable, while the latter is primarily concerned with correctness of the deliverable and meeting the quality requirements specified for the deliverable. So, to put it simply, quality will check it for the correctness and scope validation will check it for the completeness. Control quality is generally performed before validate scope. This we understand, but although the two processes may be performed in parallel in certain cases, preferably you should do the quality control first. But if at all you are doing it jointly together in parallel, that is also okay. So these were the inputs. I don't think anything is new here except for inspection. Let's see what it says about inspection. Inspection includes activities such as measuring, examining, and validating to determine whether work and deliverables meet requirements and product acceptance criteria. Inspections are sometimes called reviews. Might have heard about it, product review, or sometimes you call walkthroughs. In some application areas, these different terms have unique and specific meaning. Maybe your organization does not use these words, or maybe they don't use the inspection word, they use the review word. Maybe walkthroughs is more common. Maybe walkthrough is means something else in your organization. So this all depends how you take it and what terms you want to use. But generally speaking, when you are validating your deliverable, the process to do, the action to do is here called as inspection. Decision making, naturally we have read a lot about decision making so far. An example of decision making that may be used in this process includes but is not limited to voting. Other methods you can also use, but voting maybe three people inspecting and you at the end of the day you compare your notes and you vote for it to whomsoever maybe, and then there must be a policy. Sometimes you have adopted unanimous policy. Until and unless all the three inspectors have passed it, this deliverable will not pass. This is unanimous. Or you say majority vote. So majority vote is 2 out of 3. So 2 out of 3 wins. So that is okay. But and you can also include some discussion into it. The person who is not agreeing, he must give his viewpoint, and maybe his point is valid, and others get convinced. So this is one of the way as well. Okay. There was a movie once, 12 Angry Men, 7 Angry Men or 12 Angry Men, 10 Angry Men, something like that. Have you heard about that?
No, actually.
It's a very old movie, and that is a very interesting movie also. It is about a jury in which people bring in a murderer who is supposed to have killed his father. and
Okay.
all the proofs are against him. The knife is there, everything is there. All the proofs are against him. Whole the jury and everybody present in the court is against that. Wants this guy punished.
Okay.
At the end of it, the judge asks the jury to go into a separate room and decide, and they all goes into a separate room, and they are very happy because it's a very simple case, and everybody will have a unanimous decision. And you might understand that in such like cases in the jury, they have unanimous decision making. Until and unless everybody agrees, the person will not be punished. So I don't know, there were 10 or 12 people. So they started voting, and everybody was saying he must be punished, he must be punished, guilty, 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 guilty. The person who was asking the question was at the last, and he said not guilty. He said, "Why did you say not guilty?" Well, just for the sake of it, I just wanted to differ with you to convince me why he is guilty.
Uh-huh.
They said, "Okay, this is very simple. We can convince you. We all are convinced." So they tried to convince him, and every time they gave their argument, he came up with a counter argument. And by his
Right.
counter argument, um, one of the people changed his plea from guilty to not guilty.
Okay.
And then, they now had a harder task to convince two people to convert to guilty. So they kept arguing,
Yes.
questioning, and discussing. And as the time passed, people start converting towards the not guilty thing. And
Right.
ultimately, at the end of the day, there was only one man left who was saying guilty, and everybody else was saying not guilty. And ultimately, that had to also convert his plea to guilty, not guilty. And ultimately, that person was,
Okay.
freed. But the thing is,
Uh,
actually, in this discussion, they might have convinced each other. There were proofs which were not highlighted earlier in the court, and they were positioned like the knife. He said this is the knife he killed with. They said this kind of knife is available in the market everywhere. So that person had did some research, but this is the unanimous thing. So don't think that two people are saying that it is passed and one person is saying it is not clear. Then probably you have to convince the other person if it is unanimous. And if he doesn't get convinced, he
right.
convinces you with his argument. Probably both of you have to convert to his idea.
Right. Right.
Okay, so accepted deliverables that meet the acceptance criteria are formally signed off and approved by the customer sponsor. Formal documentation received from the customer sponsor acknowledges formal stakeholder acceptance of the project deliverable. It is forwarded to the approval project as it can be handed over ultimately to the end user. Okay, again, Chuck. Work performance, we have already understand the work performance data has been processed, and work performance information will be sent to the monitor and control project work. Change request will be sent to perform the integrated chain control, and documents will be up. Last process is the control scope. And as I said, it is all about the work of the project scope. It is all about the project scope. So, control scope is the process of monitoring the status of the project and product scope and managing changes to the scope baseline. So, uh, key benefit of this process is that the scope baseline is maintained throughout the project. So, you will keep updating the scope baseline in light of it. This process is performed throughout the project. So, what is there against which we'll compare? We are going to compare against the baseline. We have the scope baseline, so we will compare against the scope baseline. So scope baseline is taken as the parameter or the main key. This process is performed throughout the project, and how will it look like? Again, this is page number 167 of PMB. Okay. Okay. Project management plan is the input. We have in the project management plan, we require scope management plan, requirement management plan, change management plan, configuration management plan, scope baseline, and performance measurement baseline. You remember what is performance measurement baseline? This was thus all the three baselines put together. Then are the project documents.
Scope, time, and
yeah.
Yep.
Project documents, lesson learned, register, requirement document, requirement traceability matrix. Then we have the work performance data. Here also work performance data will be input and organized process assets. And data analysis is the only tool here. And it will do the variance analysis and trend analysis, which I have already mentioned to you. Variance is the difference from your baseline. The difference from your baseline, actual work and the baseline, if there is a difference, that is the variance. And the trend coming out of the various variances of the previous progress reports is the trend analysis, and naturally you will forecast and do things like that. Output would be the work performance information. The data will be converted into information. If there is a change request, let's go to the integrated change control. Project management plan will be updated, which includes the scope management plan, scope baseline, schedule baseline, cost baseline, performance measurement baseline. All of these could be updated. And project document updates include the lesson learned, requirements, documentation, and traceability metrics. So the only thing here we need to talk about is the data analysis. So let us directly jump to that and see what is that. Sir, I think I should मुझे यहाँ पे छोड़ना पड़ेगा because there is another virtual session going on and I have to join that. So probably we should call it a day then.
Okay. Okay.
Scope हो गया जी.
Only. Sorry.
Scope खत्म हो गया. We will start off with the.
हाँ जी. Okay. The only thing is, sir, actually, you mentioned that on Monday we might continue, but Monday I will not be here. Monday, Tuesday. So then after Friday, maybe we need to, reschedule how we want to continue for the remaining part. I mean, whatever is remaining in that case.
आप ये संडे को क्या कर रहे हैं?
सर संडे को भी एक्चुअली मैंने संडे को ट्रैवल करना है और मैं इनफैक्ट सॉरी सैटरडे को मैंने जाना है अहमदाबाद ना, तो उसके बाद मैं 3-4 दिन अवेलेबल नहीं हूँ अप टिल ट्यूसडे मोस्ट लाइकली.
संडे को आप नहीं है?
तो या तो ये कि सॉरी
संडे को नहीं है आप?
नहीं जी, मैं सैटरडे को भी नहीं हूँ एक्चुअली, अनफॉर्चुनेटली.
सैटरडे को नहीं है, संडे को नहीं है. चलिए फ्राइडे तो
सैटरडे संडे मंडे ट्यूसडे. तो वेडनेसडे को अगर आप अगले पे टाइम है आपके पास, वेडनेसडे थर्सडे, तो फिर हम कंटिन्यू कर सकते हैं.
कर लेते हैं, कोई मसला नहीं, कर लेते हैं. आप फिक्र ना करें, मतलब मैं आपको पूरा करवाऊंगा जैसे भी होगा. ठीक
हो गया. राइट, थैंक यू वेरी मच. बहुत शुक्रिया.
कल हम कर रहे हैं और फिर अगले वेडनेसडे को करेंगे.
ठीक है जी, बिल्कुल सही.
ओके, टेक केयर. अल्लाह हाफिज.
थैंक यू वेरी मच. अल्लाह हाफिज.